Tonight we have AEW Fight for the Fallen, live on TNT. AEW's third special that they've done in the last 3 weeks. This week, AEW Fight for the Fallen, as it was last year, it's happening around pretty much bang on a year to date of the original Fight for the Fallen. The original Fight for the Fallen last year actually happened a couple of days ago, so what, July 13th, something like that, of 2020. Either way, tonight we're going to have a special edition of AEW Dynamite, Fight for the Fallen, and they're going to be raising money for various charitable causes, those fighting COVID. The Khan family also donated $1 million earlier this year to COVID relief, and we're going to be raising money tonight for various charitable sources. You can do that by going to aewfightforthefallen.com, or you can buy the t-shirt on Pro Wrestling Tees. If you buy the t-shirt, all the proceeds will go to COVID relief and other various charitable causes that AEW have listed. So kudos to AEW for that, all for raising money for charitable causes. So it's great to see that they're putting some funds back into the COVID relief. It's great to see. But in this video, we're going to talk about a match specifically that's going to happen at Fight for the Fallen. That being the main event, the long-awaited AEW World Championship match between AEW World Champion Jon Moxley and Brian Cage, the new FTW champion, with Taz in his corner. Now, of course, this match, I say it's longly anticipated, and the match that we're going to finally see, because of course we were meant to have it last week, originally scheduled for night 2 of Fyter Fest. That all changed when Jon Moxley was exposed to a positive COVID test, that being his wife Renee Young. The story at the time was that Renee Young, this is when WWE started doing the widespread testing in the company, like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Renee Young tested positive for COVID-19. She came out and said that, well, actually, I misspeak there, because it kind of happened differently, didn't it? First of all, we had AEW come out and say that Jon Moxley was not going to be available for night 1 of AEW Fyter Fest because he had been exposed to someone who had tested positive for COVID-19. He was told to stay at home, get tested a few times, self-isolate, quarantine, and then we'll reevaluate it later on. Then it was subsequently revealed by Renee Young herself that she was the one who tested positive for COVID-19. So a lot of people said, okay, Jon Moxley, Renee Young, obviously they're married. It makes sense that she was the person that Jon Moxley was exposed to. And then right then and there, it raised a lot of questions as to what the status of this AEW World Championship match was going to be against Brian Cage, because as I mentioned, it was originally scheduled for night 2 of Fyter Fest. Now, anytime anyone's ever exposed to COVID-19, regardless of if they get negative tests, it's always best, and I believe the guidelines and the recommendation is to self-isolate and quarantine for 14 days. Jon Moxley reportedly wasn't interested in leaving his wife's side or abandoning, socially distanced from his wife. He wanted to care and look after his wife, which, again, is absolutely commendable, in my opinion, the right thing to do. We can all talk about wrestling. We can all talk about enjoying wrestling and wanting to see Jon Moxley perform and wanting to see Jon Moxley compete on TNT, but ultimately your family must and always will come first. So if your spouse is sick at home, or in the case of Jon Moxley, if Renee Young is sick at home with a positive COVID test, then I'd rather him look after his family a million times over than wrestle for my gratification or edification. It's a non-discussion point, really. So he stayed at home. I believe he's got tested numerous times, has come back with a negative COVID-19 test every time. So he hasn't, as far as we're aware, tested positive for COVID-19. But it's not really the point. We've seen false negative tests. We've seen people have COVID-19 and have no symptoms. Of course, he was getting the full COVID test, so I don't think that would be the case. But nevertheless, it's better to err on the side of caution. He said it's better to err on the side of caution. AEW rightfully said it's better to err on the side of caution. So he stayed away last week for night 2 of Fyter Fest, and it was announced that in actuality we were going to get this match during Fight for the Fallen instead of Fyter Fest. As far as I'm aware, this was always the plan to do Fight for the Fallen anyway. It's not a case of they made a show for the match sort of thing or anything like that. So as far as I'm aware, they were going to do Fyter Fest anyway. It would appear that they were going to do Fyter Fest anyway. But when you look at the charitable causes, when you look at the T-shirts, etc., that they've made, it does look like that was the plan anyway. And just Moxley and Cage getting moved back just fit into that schedule as opposed to Fyter Fest. No problem there. So it was said we're going to get that match this week instead. The really interesting build, because I think the major player when it comes to this build between Brian Cage and between Jon Moxley has been Taz. Now, Taz was the one that introduced Brian Cage back at Double or Nothing. Double or Nothing, of course, we had the Casino Ladder match with the winner getting a future AEW World Championship opportunity. That is where we saw the AEW debut of Brian Cage. Really impressive. He's stated that he actually signed with AEW. I believe it was back in January or February of this year. He mentioned that he hadn't already signed a contract with Impact, with AEW whilst he was under contract at Impact Wrestling or anything like that. That would actually be a breach of contract. But they had made him an offer and they stuck with him, they being AEW, whilst he had the injury with his bicep, whilst he had the surgery on his bicep. Commendable from AEW, and absolutely the right choice. Again, as Brian Cage mentioned, this wouldn't happen, or this doesn't happen very often in professional wrestling or sports or anything for that matter nowadays. If you're hurt, we'll stay away from you, we'll come back, and when you're healthy. AEW was completely the opposite, really. They said that the offer's there. Get healthy. Well, once your contract expires with Impact, we still want to sign you regardless. We think you're a big talent, and they're right. Brian Cage is a massive talent, just not only by the way he looks, and I think, if anything, his look almost sometimes does him a slight disservice, because the way he looks and the way he looks like he's just come out of a comic book, right? He looks like an action figure. I mean, I can't wait for the Brian Cage AEW action figure, because if anything, it won't do his physique justice, and that's on an action figure where they can actually sculpt what they look like. So that just says a lot about how Brian Cage looks. But if anything, sometimes his look does him a disservice, because he looks so great, people just think, he's just a jacked up muscle guy, he's going to do some power moves and that's it. And he's so much more than that. The way that he can work in the ring is actually really, really good. He can work like almost a cruiserweight or lucha libre style. He has that element to him. But obviously, of course, he can still do the power moves, and the drill claw and all that is a great finish, and I really enjoy that move. And I enjoy Brian Cage matches. I've enjoyed his matches for a long time. I enjoyed his work in Impact. I enjoyed his work in Lucha Underground. He's a great worker, and he's definitely one of these people that I think AEW could seriously consider putting the world title on, and we'll get onto that in a second. But Brian Cage, like I said, I think I've been really impressed with his work since coming into AEW, but I think the presentation of him and Taz has been the real standout here. Now, as I mentioned, Brian Cage made his debut at Double or Nothing, won the Casino Ladder match, became #1 contender for the AEW World Championship, and then really ever since then, this is where Taz, for me, has earned his money. The issue or the program between Brian Cage and Jon Moxley could have easily been okay, you're the #1 contender for the world title, that's it, we face off, blah blah blah, and there was no personal issue there. But Taz has really taken that to the next level for me. Taz has really been the one to really spark and ignite this feud and really get it going, and the reason as to why is because he is so damn good on the mic. Even today, and this has always been the case, I've said this for a long time, Taz is, for me, one of the top 10 promos in the business ever. And I know that's a very, very, very bold statement, but you just go back and look at his work in ECW. He's always been good on the mic. And I think because of his commentary career, sometimes people almost overlook, somehow, his in-ring work, and that really shouldn't be the case. Taz's work whilst he was wrestling for ECW, not so much for WWE because he had the injuries and they put him in weird pajamas and all of that weird stuff, maybe at the start of his run, but certainly not towards the end of it or anything like that. But especially in ECW, when you go back and look at prime Taz in ECW, when they didn't script promos, when they didn't put words under his nose and didn't have a writer tell him what to say, because who can know what to say better than Taz himself? Taz on the mic sometimes is untouchable. He has got that proper New York accent, proper just spits fire, aggression, anger, reality, in your face. I don't care what you say, this is what I have to say attitude, and he's brought that to this feud with Jon Moxley and Brian Cage. And I wouldn't wish anyone to get COVID or anything like that. I think it's a bit of a stretch for me to say COVID's the best thing to happen to this feud, but they've definitely turned a negative into a positive here. And maybe that's a terrible pun considering the test off the top of my head. But Taz, now he had a bit of meat on the bone when it comes to Jon Moxley not being there for the last few weeks, when it comes to Jon Moxley not being there for Fyter Fest or not being there for Dynamite because of these issues around the COVID. He has just cut some of the best promos. The best promos. When, I mean, we still talk about it a few weeks later. We're still talking about the sloppy shop promo that got heat from WWE, which, again, WWE, if you don't want to be angry about it, actually don't run a sloppy shop. So there you go for that one. But then he's calling Jon Moxley a coward. He's saying to stay at home. And he twisted it into reality that you kind of believed that he was shooting. He's twisted it in reality. He's going, we're all getting tested here. Why can't you get to come here and get tested? Because you're scared. You're afraid. You don't want to face Brian Cage. You know exactly what's going to happen to you if you show up here. And yeah, for me, Taz has just, he's taken this feud from just your next run-of-the-mill world title feud, which it had the potential to be, and that's no slight on Jon Moxley or Brian Cage. That's more because it's more because of just the way sometimes these feuds work, in the sense of, okay, you're number one contender. Where's the issue? There isn't one. Whereas Taz now has made there an issue. When there is an issue, it always makes the feud better. It always makes the storyline better. The stakes are already high because it's an AEW World Championship match, but the stakes are higher now because Jon Moxley has been away and Taz has been just verbally destroying him, and Jon Moxley hasn't been able to do a response. Now, what I must say as well is prior to this, because we can't just focus on the weeks that Jon Moxley hasn't been there, because this feud has been going on a little bit before Jon Moxley was away from AEW. And during then, I thought the segments were okay. I thought the best segment was when Brian Cage just beat the hell out of Jon Moxley and threw him onto a car, and he had the promo between Taz and Jon Moxley. I think every time we have had a face-off between Brian Cage and Jon Moxley, in terms of physicality, Brian Cage has come out on top, which I think is the way to do it in world title feuds, because if Jon Moxley does retain, then he's overcome the adversity, and that's what he should do as a babyface. But like I said, what I've enjoyed the most, not just have the promos when Taz hasn't been there, but when Jon Moxley hasn't been there by Taz, but when Taz and Moxley have both been there, I think their verbal duels on the mic have been really good. And to be honest, we saw with the Brody Lee versus Jon Moxley feud that it was a kind of one and done feud heading into Double or Nothing, right? Brody Lee was number one contender. Jon Moxley beat him. It was way too early for Brody Lee, I think, to be in the main event picture, because he hasn't been the same since. Because he lost, and then he goes to the bottom of the pile, and then just now he's doing a weird, I don't know, angle with Colt Cabana. It's a bit odd, and I'm not really feeling that one. But that one, again, that was just kind of thrown together, and there was no issue there. And it was a one and done thing. It was done at Double or Nothing, and then we haven't seen anything since. Personally, regardless of the outcome here, and I know that AEW haven't really been ones to do this when it comes to their world title feuds, or many feuds for that matter, but I want to see this go farther than Fight for the Fallen for me. I wouldn't mind seeing the match here and then seeing the rematch. And how many times has that happened so far in AEW? Because they don't really do it. Because of the way they tell their stories, because of the way their events are spaced out, it's kind of, the story is what it is building up to the event. They have the match at the event, and then after the event, they tend to go to a completely different story. That's kind of how it works. It's very, very rare in AEW now that they have a match whereby it goes to, say, Double or Nothing, they have the match, and they go, okay, we're going to continue this to All Out. They don't really do it. Is that because of the time span between the events? Maybe, but I think I would be slightly sad to see this feud end at Fight for the Fallen tonight. I think there's more to it here. I think there's more story to be told here. And regardless of the outcome tonight, I'd like this to continue, purely because I just don't think we've seen enough of it as well. Because of the circumstances about, obviously, with Moxley staying away from AEW, and just I think there's more to it. I think there's more we can see. I think there's more we can do when it comes to the verbal duels of Taz and Jon Moxley, and I think there's just more there. That's how I feel about that one. Now, last week on night 2 of AEW Fyter Fest, I'm always getting confused by all of these names, but AEW Fyter Fest Night 2, we knew going into it that Taz had a major announcement to make. He had a major announcement to make with Brian Cage, and no one knew what it was. It was certainly a surprise, and the surprise was that Taz has brought back to life, revitalized, resurrected, whatever you want to call it, the FTW Championship that he held in ECW. Now, as far as people saying how can they do that, isn't that WWE's intellectual property? I don't think so, because I think it's literally Taz's property. It was Taz that introduced it to ECW. It has no reference to ECW on the title, as far as I'm aware. The first FTW Championship that actually did say ECW on it, as well as Taz. But this one doesn't. It's just FTW. So I don't think it's a legality issue at all when it comes to that. And he's rechristened Brian Cage as the new FTW champion. And he says that this championship proves that you're the baddest MFer in professional wrestling right now. And that's exactly what Brian Cage is. And to be honest, I thought the title looks great around Brian Cage. It's still a great looking title. Of all this talk recently about titles and new titles, right? The US Championship and titles, so they look great. They're redesigns. I love the FTW Championship, but I think it's a great looking championship. People that aren't fully aware of what it is, it's kind of, what's the best way to describe it? It's a symbolic championship. Of course, there's no real competitor for it. It's a bit like the $1 Million Championship in WWE. It's a specific title to Taz in ECW. I believe he brought it in when there was a bit of a... was it Shane Douglas was the ECW champion at the time and he was away for a while, so Taz just said, I'm FTW champion, and then it became a thing you carry around with the ECW championship, and then he merged it together. I believe Sabu once won the FTW championship. My ECW history off the top of my head is not amazing, I must say. But it's a largely symbolic title. And so when they brought it back last week, I loved it. I'm a wrestling historian. I love old school wrestling or just anything. I love anything different. And I love when they bring back things from the past. I definitely think there's a place for stuff from the past. So I really enjoyed it last week, and I thought it's a nice rub to Brian Cage. It makes Brian Cage feel bigger than he possibly could have, or even looks bigger than he possibly could have. And that's the point, isn't it? The whole point of Taz being in the mouthpiece for Brian Cage is not only to get Brian Cage over, but it's to build him up as a big star. And Taz's promos do that, but also giving him the FTW Championship certainly does that. That's something unique to Taz. No other manager could do that. If anyone else was the manager of Brian Cage, they couldn't give Brian Cage the FTW Championship. If Brian Cage was on his own, cutting promos and just feuding with Jon Moxley, nobody else, he couldn't be the FTW Champion, and I don't think he would have been elevated to the level that he has been. It works. It works. I was, quite frankly, I was very, very, very surprised to see the response on social media last week when Taz reintroduced the FTW Championship. I was 99% certain that it would be met with universal acclaim and credit. Everyone would be like, this is great, the FTW Championship, awesome. I love the FTW Championship. I love old school ECW. Great, it's great. Brian Cage holding the FTW Championship, awesome. Because that's what I thought. I thought it was great. I loved to see that. I thought it was a cool announcement. I thought it was a cool thing for AEW to do. Not only does it give Brian Cage credibility, it also gives AEW credibility because it links them to ECW. And again, it's a fun nod to the past. But some people were really angry. And maybe this is just social media, and you have to take social media, not even with a pinch of salt, with a whole handful of salt when it comes to things like this. But people were really angry about it. Why AEW trying to be ECW? Why are AEW looking back into the past so much? Oh, typical AEW, recycling old material. Oh, AEW, why are they doing this? And I see this, and I'm like, whoa, calm down. First of all, calm down, right? There are some very, very, and this has been a learning curve for me recently, but there are some very angry people on social media. Why they're angry, I'm sure they've got their reasons. But they're just a very angry group of people sometimes when it comes to social media. So that's one. Two, there is this group of people as well on social media that for some reason, and again, I can't really describe as to why, but they just despise AEW with a passion. So much so that anything they do is bad, regardless, right? And again, and I'm not trying to make this a you or I video, because I like both products. I like WWE. I like pro wrestling. That should be it, right? I like WWE. I like AEW. I like New Japan. I like Impact. I like watching whatever. If it's good pro wrestling, I'll watch it. So it's not a case of this division or this such tribal thing. It's just what it turned into. It's tribal. So there are some people that you brought back last week. Oh, AEW, blah, blah. And then there are some people that just didn't like it. Some people thought that it was AEW looking back on the past and they shouldn't do that. I don't get that. I don't get that line of thinking. I mean, I understand some people going, well, why aren't they doing anything new? But I mean, the FTW Championship hasn't been around for like 25 years. Like, I'm pretty sure that bringing that back is pretty cool. You know, even for it, I don't think the FTW Championship is going to be around next year when it comes to AEW. I think it's maybe a thing for a few months. It's fun. It's a Tazism, and it gets Brian Cage over. It elevates Brian Cage over. That's it. You know, it's okay. And if it doesn't work, it won't work out, and it'll be gone relatively soon. Some people just need to calm down. It's going to be okay. That's what almost I want to respond when I see these things. Why are they doing it? AEW, why are they bringing back things from the past? How dare they? I'm like, everything's going to be fine. You calm down. Everything's going to be okay. And, you know, it's not going to hurt you. It can't hurt you. It's the FTW Championship. And when I see things like this, I'm just saying, if you don't like it, don't tune in. That's how you can really show your voice or anything like that. It's just silly. Some of those Wednesday Night War things are just very, very silly. That whole thing last week, when it came to the ratings last week, my word, how silly did that get? With total viewership was NXT, and then in the demos it was AEW, and it just got really silly. It just got so silly and so divisive. If anything, the worst thing that can happen, and it should be the best thing, like the best thing that should happen is that NXT starts winning total viewership and starts bringing in more viewers, right? Because it will make AEW better and it will make NXT better. The best thing to have on Wednesday nights, if we want to have two good products, which we do, is to have competitive competition. It shouldn't be so one-sided and lopsided. So NXT winning should be a good thing, but if anything, it's not, because it just makes it even more divisive. Because then people, one of their tribes is winning, and it's so close to winning every week. So we got to beat the other tribe and beat the other tribe down. And anyone that supports or says anything positive about the other, they need to be put down because they don't share the same opinion as me. And opinions, I don't want to be crass, but opinions are, the phrase, they're like, you know what, everyone has them. That is it. It's an opinion. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it wrong. It's pro wrestling. It's opinion. That's what's great about it. Everyone can have their opinion. You don't have to accept it. Everything I've said in this video now, you can tell me you are talking complete rubbish. I don't believe a word you said. You're wrong. And that's fine. Because it's my opinion. It's my opinion, and that's fine. And I would go to you, that's fine. That's your opinion. Cool. That's cool. We're talking about wrestling. That's what this channel is about. It's about talking about wrestling. And that's what it should always be. Not about arguing or being one or the other. Just let's enjoy both products, So, in terms of the ratings, and we'll discuss that slightly and the prediction before we wrap things up here. In terms of the ratings this week, I do expect AEW to win both the demo and the total viewership this week. NXT doesn't really have anything in comparison to it to counter-program it. Obviously, they had the Great American Bash 2 weeks going up against Fyter Fest. That isn't the case this week. There is no competition really. They've got, I believe, an NXT Women's Championship match between Tegan Nox and the champion Io Shirai, which would be a good match, but I don't think that's going to be able to compete in terms of the other matches that Fight for the Fallen have, whether it is a World Championship match or they've got FTR versus the Lucha Brothers, which we'll do a match on tonight. We've also got a TNT Championship match tonight, so there is so much going on that I think AEW has really stacked this show, so I think it's very, very, very likely that AEW wins total viewership and the demo. They always win the demo anyway. They're always about top 7 or 8 in the demos, which, let's just not get involved in the demos, because then we'll start the argument of whether they matter or not, whether total viewership matters, whatever. But I do expect AEW to break the streak this week, because NXT have won it the last 3 weeks, and it has hurt AEW. If you look at Tony Khan's tweets last week, there is no way that it didn't hurt him. He can talk about he was really happy and proud of AEW, and I'm sure he is. But he wouldn't be making those tweets defending the ratings if he had won both total viewership and the demo. So it must have hurt some people, and it probably hurt AEW staff, employees, wrestlers, and it certainly probably woke a few people up. And hopefully, again, competition is a great thing, and being close and being competitive can only help the product and help both products and help the week 5. And last week, look, there was about 1.4, close to 1.5 million viewers watching. At 1.5 million viewers was the average rating of Raw. Can you imagine this week if both shows together, imagine that both shows did 800,000 each, and they bring in 1.6 million live viewers. That would be more than Monday Night Raw. Could you believe that? That would be a talking point. That would be something worth discussing, because I think that reflects on Monday Night Raw very, very, very badly, doesn't it? And we did a video on the Raw ratings, so be sure to check that out on the channel. In terms of going back to Brian Cage and Jon Moxley, and we can wrap this up here. In terms of prediction, I think it's a really tough one. I really do think it's a tough one. A couple of weeks ago, I would have said Jon Moxley without a shadow of a doubt. But I think Brian Cage, there is definitely potential here for him to win it. And I'd love for him, to be honest, to win it. I think the combination between him and Taz, I think, is great. I think it works. Like I said, I don't think this Jon Moxley-Brian Cage feud is over, so I'd like to see another match after tonight. I'd like to see this feud continue. Whether it will, considering that their next event is All Out, I don't know, but they could certainly have the match tonight and then have another match on Dynamite in a few weeks, pop a rating, do something like that. So hopefully this feud isn't over. I think with Jon Moxley being away from AEW for a few weeks, it certainly has made me consider more that Brian Cage could win it, and I think Brian Cage to be the world champion would be a good thing, because he's not a WWE guy, right? He's not WWE tainted. All the AEW world champions so far have been WWE guys. I know there's only been 2, but so have most of the challengers for the AEW world championship. They've been WWE guys too, whether it is Jon Moxley, Brody Lee, Chris Jericho, Cody Rhodes, Jake Hager. I mean, they all are WWE guys, regardless of where they are now. That's where they've made their name. So I'd like Brian Cage to possibly become the world champion, purely because I know Brian Cage isn't an AEW guy, because he's only been with the company for a while, but he certainly isn't a WWE guy. He wasn't a name built up by WWE. I think that's really important when it comes to having a world champion. You've got to have uniqueness. You've got to have people that are your guys and can set the company apart, and it's something we haven't seen on WWE TV before. So I don't think Brian Cage can be completely ruled out of winning the AEW World Championship tonight. However, I do think that Jon Moxley will retain. I do think there are bigger plans for Jon Moxley to defend the AEW World Championship at All Out later this year. Against who? It's up for discussion. It could be Kenny Omega. Obviously, they have the rematch from Full Gear. So a lot of people are saying MJF. I think MJF would be a great opponent for him. Is it too soon for MJF? I doubt it. I think MJF, again, if he wins the World Championship, it's another case of it's an AEW guy being the World Champion, setting yourself apart from the competition by not having an ex-WWE guy be the World Champion. So I think it could be Jon Moxley retain tonight, and then possibly he goes on to face MJF All Out. Or, look, Brian Cage could do it tonight, and then we have the Jon Moxley-Brian Cage feud continue. That could certainly happen too. So really interested in this one. Should be a fun match. My only hope is that he doesn't do a bit of a Brody Lee after this match, Brian Cage, and then it just doesn't feel the same and he loses momentum. However, I feel like with Taz in his corner, that will be difficult, but we have seen the same with Lance Archer when he lost, and even though he's got Jake Roberts in his corner, he feels like he's sort of spinning his wheels slightly ever since he lost to Cody at Double or Nothing. So they do need to sort that out when it comes to the heels losing the big matches at the pay-per-views. Maybe Brian Cage is the first one to break that duck. We'll have to wait and see tonight. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on the Brian Cage versus Jon Moxley match tonight? What are your predictions? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wrestle News 365. We're over 400 subscribers now. The next goal is 500 on our road to 1,000. So be sure to share, like, and subscribe. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video and another video for you to watch. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. They're on the screen too right now. It's at 365Wrestle on Twitter and at WrestleNews365 on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.